We have to stop thinking about our collective health, our personal health, as just physical health. We need to all lose weight and have regulated blood sugar. It's like, yeah, sure. But we need more than anything. And also probably one of the most straightforward ways to be in a healthier body is to focus on our mental health and focus on these tenets of mental fitness in terms of really building a resilience for our emotional world, our cognitive world, and our mind.
Drew, it is so great to have you on Untangle today. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, Patricia, it's such a treat to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you and everyone listening all about building mental
Yeah.
fitness.
Yes, your book was so interesting. And so much of your work is focused on things like neuroplasticity, inflammation, the gut microbiome. These all play a really important role in our mental health. And I wanted to understand, why this became important to you. What was your inspiration for writing this particular book? Because there are a lot of books on mental health and mental fitness, and this is a very unique one. And I did love reading through it, and we're going to go through all of the 9 tenets. But what was your inspiration for writing this book? And then maybe you can explain a little bit about some of the different pieces of it that are really critical to
Yeah.
understanding.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I hope it sits with people in a unique way, being in some ways, new concept that everyone listening, I'm sure you, Patricia, myself, we all have physical fitness goals for this week, maybe even for
Right.
today. And so this book really came from my desire as a psychiatrist and a practicing psychiatrist. So I'm a physician focused on mental health. And a lot of times people know my profession and colleagues around just medications. And really, another way to think about it is we're experts in the biology of the mind, moods, cognition. And there's so much new biology going on that we have a direct say in every day. And I'm so fortunate. I think in some ways this book came from my work with my patients. It's I would say really the most kind of intimate group effort I've ever had of sharing how I'm seeing people get better and how people have shared their stories with me of what's working. And so the book, in some ways, really comes from these stories supported by all the new research, which really has happened over the last 10 to 15 years, thinking about these themes that you're talking about, neuroplasticity, inflammation, and then all of the really surprising things that we'll be talking about that affect this. It's shocking to see your inflammatory factors go up when you suffer and struggle more with social isolation. And so as a practicing clinician, as a psychiatrist, my interest really is how do you begin to create structures within your own life, or as I say in session a lot, frameworks, to make sure that the time that you have and the time that you invest in your health and your wellness is taking care of the most important part of that, which really we've all been missing. The most important part of our health and our wellness is our mental health. There is no health without mental health.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to give people a framework for that. And I think the urgency is now. Right?
Yeah.
It's called the modern brain because our brains are up against some new stuff. We've never had a brain filled with microplastics. We've never had a brain that has so much exciting stimulation in the screen. It's shocking how good the algorithms are. We've never had relational dynamics like we have today. So there is a lot of old stuff that we're all in some ways
Yeah.
dealing with. And then there's a lot of new stuff the modern brain is contending with.
Are you seeing more and more patients with depression, anxiety? And when you talk about mental health, let's start with defining mental health. Like what does that mean? And what is mental unhealth
Yeah.
as well?
So as a psychiatrist, mental health means to me that you're functioning at really a wonderfully optimal, good, happy, connected level. That's probably a long-winded definition, but that you have the capacity on the most basic level to work in a fulfilling way, ideally in a purposeful way. Probably the most important part for me is I'm a psychiatrist. I do a lot of psychotherapy, and I trained at Columbia psychiatry, where there's a long tradition in doing therapy and seeing patients on a weekly basis. And so relationships and relationship health, how you function in a relationship, what you give in a relationship, what your reasonable needs are, But that kind of functioning, again, being able to create a deep sense of trust, connection, attachment, and intimacy. So, and then mental health, in a very concrete way, is being free of symptoms, severe symptoms, for example, of depression, anxiety, the cognitive disorders, whether those are things struggling with our memory, like pre-dementia or cognitive deficits, or struggling with things like our focus and ADHD. And then, of course, there's all the substance use disorders, which have really, the landscape has shifted so much, as we've seen in the last year. This is the first book I'm launching where I stopped drinking shortly after my last book came out, which was all about eating to beat depression. And so, kind of felt like, all right, it was one of those things that's probably not so good. And, as we just learned, and I think all of us in medicine know and have known for a long time, it wasn't a surprise to any of us that alcohol causes cancer. But so the substance use disorders and thinking about how those affect our health. And I would say the way that, again, also has shifted. We talk about use disorders, i.e., it's not really a question, do you have, quote unquote, addiction? Or it's more of, are you in a pattern, whether it's alcohol or carbohydrates or cannabis or, cocaine? Are you in a pattern that, is not serving you? You're not able to control, you're not able to function. So those are a lot of different areas of mental health that I just touched on. And a little bit of mental unhealth. When do you have symptoms? I think everybody listening knows when they're having mental health symptoms, right? They start sometimes with insomnia, worry. I think the ones I find patients often find most upsetting are the almost like the emotional, physical, right? When you're overwhelmed with grief, or you can't stop crying, or you have a buzz going inside that you can't quite comprehend.
Well, how do you determine whether someone needs to make x number of changes in their lives, which often takes time? I think this is a big frustration that a lot of people have, that making lifestyle changes requires changing habits and patterns in your life and making a commitment and being disciplined to those things, because if you have a one good night's sleep, you might feel better the next day, but it's not a one and done. And so how do you as a psychiatrist decide, along with the patient, whether medication would be more helpful to get someone on a path versus really focusing on, for example, the gut microbiome, which you talk a lot about?
Well, I don't see it as all in some ways either or. In medication choice for a lot of patients, one, it'd be symptom severity. Two, it's history and pattern. If someone has had a horrible suicidal depression and they've never tried a medication, I mean, that I don't know, it's kind of an emergency in my mind. Family history. There are a lot of different ways, but also, like most of my colleagues practicing, there's a lot of strong patient preference. And I think a lot of that based on misinformation about the efficacy of antidepressants, and really skilled professional, skilled psychiatrist, psychiatric nurse practitioner, someone who sits with you, knows you. We do a really, when I meet people with depression, I'm like, oh, yikes, we don't have anything. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox. And so some disorders also, it's just so much stigma about, but people do better on medication. If you have bipolar disorder and you respond to lithium, Lamictal, another mood stabilizer, it's life changing.
Yeah.
In terms of the other things, and this is where Healing the Modern Brain comes in, I want it for everyone. I'm really tired of this idea that the only way that I'm useful to you is when you're mentally sick, ill, symptomatic, hitting rock bottom. Someone finally pulled you aside and said, you really need to see someone.
Right.
It's just absolute garbage. It's a horrible way to take care of our mental health. It's a horrible way for our country to take care of its mental health. So this book is a wake-up call to be proactive. Healing the Modern Brain says, stop thinking about mental health in terms of the mental illness epidemic. Start thinking about mental health as something that all of us need to walk arm in arm building. Right? It starts with ourselves, our daily activity. And as you notice, like behavioral change is hard, but also we're really making this way too complicated. People think they've got to like cold plunge and eat these special foods and eat this ratio of proteins and amino acids. And like, that's the path to like longevity, big muscles, feeling great, cognitive clarity. And like, yes, there's some cool advanced techniques. I talk about them in the book. Lots of people are talking about them, but these basics are missing. Right? These basic.
You're so right. I mean, we hear a lot about people going to extreme levels, And I think it can be intimidating for people thinking, well, do I have to run like 6 marathons this year? Do I have to cold plunge? Do I have to,
No,
exercise two
no,
hours a day?
no.
Right.
There are
So,
9 tenets. None of them are cold plunging. And in
okay.
part, it's because I really wanted to focus the book on two things. The two real motivating factors for how I chose these tenets. The number one piece for me is that I could back these ideas up with evidence of how they affect the core processes that create our mental health, our brain's ability to repair itself, our
Mm-hmm.
body's ability to regulate inflammation, and our ability to engage in our very nuanced and rich emotional, relational, I call it psychospiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the evidence. The second
Yeah.
part is around what I hear right here on this couch, and it's it's the most incredible privilege I've had in my life to hear the inner workings, what's going on, the real raw truth, what is
Yeah.
really happening, what someone is thinking, how they're suffering.
Mm.
And so that's where these tenets came from, to think what is really effective. So no, you don't have to go run a marathon. You definitely don't have to cold plunge. But if you went dancing tonight, surprisingly, you would be engaging in the behavior that has the largest antidepressant effect, larger than medications, larger than psychotherapy, according to a recent meta-analysis. Now, I think that's really intriguing. I've never really pushed or made that recommendation, but I've certainly seen it work. And I tell the story in the book of a patient who taught this to me well before this meta-analysis came out, a woman who
Yeah.
I pushed, like all of us, exercise, get out there. She, like a lot of people, hated the gym, didn't like, especially as a woman, going to a big urban gym, just, wasn't her thing. One day she came in beaming. Wow, like what happened? What's going on? And she'd returned to tango dancing, something I had no idea she'd done as a younger, version of herself. And just suddenly she was doing all these tenets of mental fitness. She
Mm.
was moving. She was connecting with people, one of the most important tenets. She was living a more purposeful life, the last tenet, the most, in some ways, the kind of highest. She was sleeping better because, of course,
Mm.
she's moving her body. She's like exhausted. They dance for hours and hours at these tango classes. I had no idea. So this is where the tenets came from, and I think I want
Mm.
people to know, because there are so many strong opinions, and there's so many provocative opinions of what we should do for our mental health. And those of us who are in mental health practicing have been sitting for tens of thousands of hours listening.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, when you're on the hook clinically and someone's suffering in front of you because your treatment plan isn't working, there's nobody more motivated to get it right than those of us on the clinical side. And so
Yeah.
that's where these
Yeah.
tenets come from.
Drew, I usually ask this in the beginning, but what's your bigger why for having written this book?
The bigger why for me is that I've spent a lot of time in nutritional psychiatry and how food affects our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited around the opportunity with that. So many people are just, they've not put food and mental health together. They've not thought about their dietary plan in what they choose to eat in terms of their mood or anxiety or sleep quality. And there's so much
Mm-hmm.
research that came out. That said, most of the time, I ask every patient I treat about food. I'm curious. I want to hear their patterns, their habits, their values. But as a psychiatrist, a lot of times people are coming to see me for treatment for very significant psychiatric concern,
Yeah.
depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD, alcohol use disorder, where nutrition is a piece of that. And I think the why is I saw so many people struggling with their mental health during the pandemic, after the pandemic, and wanting to offer some encouragement and some clarity for people, and really a declaration. I think the why for me, as I say at the end of the book, is we do need a revolution. We need a mental
Mm.
fitness revolution. We have to stop thinking about our collective health, our personal health, as just physical health. We need to all lose weight and have regulated blood sugar. It's like, yeah, sure. But we need more than anything, and also probably one of the most straightforward ways to be in a healthier body is to focus on our mental health and focus on these tenets of mental fitness
Mm-hmm.
in terms of really building a resilience for our emotional world, our cognitive world, and our mind.
So I want to go through the 9 tenets with you one at a time. And I do want to take a deeper dive into nutrition. Because I think for all of these things, just like when you take a lab test and there's a reference range, there's a right amount that we can do to be our best in our best
Mm-hmm.
mental fitness state. So I want you to talk about that as it relates to each of these tenets. So let's go.
Some specifics, and for
Yes.
I'm happy to talk specific,
Okay.
and
Good.
I think
Good.
it's
Good.
important because a lot of times this type of work can, it can sound very, I don't want to say hand wavy, but very light, right? Oh, you should move a little more. You should sleep a little better. You should eat a little better, and people have been
Yeah.
getting these recommendations. And so probably the other reason for my why, Patricia, is I've spent maybe 10 or 15 years now in media around mental health. This is my 5th book. And I think I just feel more clear about my voice and my stance
Yeah.
and the truth of how people need to work on their mental health. And I think I turned 50, and I wanted to share it in some way with a little bit more punch and passion.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share what I've learned from my patients. I think that's also the why.
That makes so much sense. And you say these, and this is what's unique about your book, because you're right. Some of these recommendations are common in other books, but what you're talking about is that these 9 core tenets, they work together to promote neuroplasticity, facilitate neurogenesis, which you'll explain to us, reduce inflammation, and foster a healthy microbiome. Pick up a healthy microbiome, ultimately helping individuals protect their brains and safeguard their mental health from the challenges of today's world. So that's a lofty, so it's a lofty expectation. And I am so eager to understand how to use these 9 tenets. And do we need to use all of them? And do we need
All
to
9 every day, Patricia, especially you, especially everyone listening.
Okay, so
Thank
I'm
you
going
for,
to
by the
start.
way, the kind words about that. And I hope that the Healing the Modern Brain is a mix in a new take. In movement, I don't tell you to go lift weights. I don't tell
No,
you to start pounding protein and nutrition. And, as I mentioned, I tell you to go dancing, or I share with you the evidence that things like stretching, dancing, forest bathing, walking, you're going to get a lot of benefit, probably more benefit, because a lot of the people I meet are sitting on the sidelines feeling really guilty that they're not like benching 350. Maybe that's
right.
just me.
Yes, so we need to know like how much
Yeah, so let me
of
tell you
this
how much,
we.
and let's start maybe with the definition of mental fitness and just how I
Okay,
wanted to define that behavior, because it's or
great.
that idea, right?
Okay,
Because it's a notion, again, you're going into every year, every week, really every day with some notion of some of these tenets. And Patricia, the way that I want people to decide is really how I work clinically. When you're my patient, I work for you. Like, you are my boss. I am here to provide and serve. And so I want to know what's most important in terms of where you want to start. And obviously, if there's something that's missing, I'm going to chime in. But some of these are every day. You just got to get nutrition every day right. You have to get every forkful perfect for brain food. No, but boy, I just get so curious. Like, what would that be for you? What would that? It would be unique for you, Patricia. For everyone listening, it would be unique for you. But there is a kind of perfect day or great day or optimal day of eating for optimal mental health, and we'll talk about that. So mental fitness
great.
is the knowledge, again, new knowledge. Right? What's your favorite food for zinc? I didn't have an answer to that, which is kind of embarrassing. Or magnesium. Oh, we all know magnesium is great for you, but we just reach for that powder. Well, where do you get, what's your favorite magnesium food or omega-3 food, right? We don't, these basic nutrients, a lot of times we don't know where to find them. So the knowledge, right? The patterns, which is just, things like when you go to bed, your habits, you drive by the bar every afternoon on the way home to have a quick beer with some friends. And then skills, new things that you need to learn. And so I wanted to create these kind of categories to give people, whether you're learning a new skill or you're just gaining some new knowledge, there are lots and lots of kind of aspects to this, or ways to engage with mental fitness. And then what does all this do? It culminates in an approach to a more enjoyable, more mentally sound life, i.e. enjoying your life, you're more engaged in it. And it's really designed for these unrealistic demands. that over and over we're too busy, we're overscheduled. The idea of healing the modern brain is that no longer can we sit with this notion of like, oh, good, I don't have mental illness.
Yeah.
The modern world is coming for you. And I don't want to be fear mongering. It's just the most dangerous illness to everybody listening is like so obvious in the data, and it's not on anyone's radar. Like by far the most dangerous illness that causes the most disability in the world in America is depression, right? The largest risk to you if you are a white male over 50 is substance use disorders and suicide. I mean, it's just so clear in the data. And so these sort of tenets come from how do we, in an evidence-based way, insulate against those? How do we kind of push back? I'm from Indiana, and I played basketball. You learn to like block out when somebody shoots the ball, you like so you can get the rebound. And I think about that all the time because blocking out, if you're a Hoosier, it's real important to be aggressive down in the paint, and to block out, you got to have like a good stance, right? You got to get down low. You got to be really aware of everyone around you. And in doing that, though, you create space for yourself. And it's just like that with the modern world. And so that's what mental fitness is, right? It's this notion of you having a framework that considers things like your genetics, your lifestyle, your situation, your economics, and helps you create an empowering plan in that. No matter where you are in this life, you can build mental fitness. So let's start with the tenets and think about that. And I think, again, this idea that it's a process, mental fitness. It's proactive and preventative. Right? Doesn't mean you're always going to feel great, but when you don't feel great, you have a lot of tools in what to do. It's science-based. I talk, there's well over 200 studies in the book. And so I try to share those in a fun way because I think science is really cool and fun. And then again, it's about you and your needs. I learned this a lot from nutritional psychiatry. It's easy to talk about the Mediterranean diet, right? But nobody's talking about Morocco. Nobody's talking about like a Turkish diet, right? Well, they're on the Mediterranean, same diet, or similar diet. I don't mean to, normalize things, but so let's talk about the 9 tenets. So
so we want to start. Let's go in order because on our podcast we talk a lot about self-awareness. Regardless of the topic, there's always an element of noticing and how self-aware we are with our own behaviors, our own actions, how motivated we are. So I think your idea of taking note of our patterns and behaviors and really understanding the why of when we get stuck in unhealthy habit loops, and then how to transition that into something that's healthier. So maybe you can share some of your advice or your wisdom on how to become more self-aware.
Well, in some ways, I want everybody to hear in the process of the book and talking with the editors and sitting, self-awareness went from a later tenet to the first one.
Yes.
And it was a really meaningful moment for everybody involved in the book where it just sort of made so much sense. Let's start with you. Let's start with your level of self-awareness. Let's start with a bit of an accounting of that. It varies in different places. Some people are amazing at work. They go out on a date and they're not oriented quite right, let's say, or they're not feeling confident in the same way. So in different spheres of our lives, we have different levels of self-awareness. We have different sets of skills. But all of our change in the building of self-awareness, the building of mental fitness, really requires us to be self-aware, to take a lot more responsibility. I talk in this chapter of self-awareness about a process called externalization. It's a very challenging spot. I find myself in it a lot, where we're blaming those things outside of ourselves, our circumstances, our genetics, our trauma, our boss. And it's, again, often these things are true, right? But it puts us in a very disempowered spot. When we begin to see ourselves, and again, from self-awareness, this notion of really we can find a path forward, that we have strength, resilience, we have potency. And so self-awareness is really asking you to sit with yourself, think about some of what we call your defenses. And often how people, I think, sit in denial of the self. And so I share some of the techniques I use with patients and some of what I hear a lot on the couch on how people really undermine their self-esteem and their self-awareness. with an effort to get you started.
Okay. So are there particular practices we would do to become more aware of self?
Yeah, I think there's three. I mean, you're
Yeah.
in the meditation world, and so
Yeah.
meditation I love because it's about teaching us self-awareness and oftentimes physical sensations and mental
Yeah.
sensations, right? Let's take a breath and fill our lungs and shift our focus. Let's feel the nose, the air coming in through, the edge of our nostrils. And so, in some ways, exerting power over our mind, not to drift in an endless worry or sadness, but to pull attention to something. As a therapist, one of the ways that I've really enjoyed self-awareness is how, because you sit with people so often, you can end up stuck in positions. And so having a self-awareness of your body pattern, I'll do this a lot. Like, for example, in a moment of silence before a meal, of trying to sit with a self-awareness, but making sure little things like I like to uncross my legs and have my palms up in a kind of receiving stance. And so self-awareness of, I like checking in. So whether that's formal meditation of trying to clear your mind, or my favorite is journaling. I really like to start a morning with a quick journal entry, trying not just to account for my day. Oh, dear diary, here we are on Tuesday, and I'm feeling okay. Yesterday the kids did this. I mean, I like those entries a lot, but I
Yeah.
really kind of push myself and have pushed myself again to deepen my writing to myself and to have it be about the more important themes in my life. I noticed a lot of my writing was externalizing, and I had this notion of really wanting to write about the most important things in my life. And I realized I hadn't been journaling a lot about my kids, and it really struck me. And so just having a journal. I have mine right over here in my bag. I had a patient before this, and so missed my journaling session. But as I've been thinking, in a very kind of frantic but busy way, I made a pledge to myself I was going to live the tenets of mental fitness every day. And so part of that is I'm on a daily journeying commitment.
Awesome. That is so great. Okay. So the next one is my personal favorite. I've studied this a lot. We've had a lot of experts on the show, a lot of different opinions, and that is nutrition.
Mm.
And I would love to understand, like, what in our diet today is wreaking havoc on our mental health. And you also talk in the book, there's problems with supplements, and maybe we should be getting more of our nutrients in our foods. So I'd love for you to.
We should. Patricia, you've had lots of experts, but I want to be everybody's favorite nutritional psychiatry expert. I do. I think I'm the most fun. I think my pesto is the tastiest, and I think my recommendations are the most reasonable.
Okay.
Because the data is really clear at this point, with 7 randomized clinical trials showing
Okay.
that a Mediterranean diet or a modified Mediterranean diet, or probably a better way to say it, is a traditional diet made of whole foods, a lot of plants, more seafood, more fermented foods, more legumes, right? That diet, which has been now tested around the world, is really good for the brain. It's really good for the gut, and it's really good for most people is a way to start. And to cut through all this confusion, there's so
Yes.
much misinformation, whether it's misinformation about kale or misinformation or these just like hyperbolic claims about keto. Like, keto's super cool, but like everybody in psychiatry has known keto is interesting for, I don't know, more than a decade. Dr. I'm going to forget his last name, at University of Louisville, presented a case report years ago that got all of us thinking about mild forms of bipolar disorder perhaps being responsive to more it's like lower carbohydrate diets, not maybe necessarily fully ketogenic, but periods where there's more ketone formation. So nutrition. Let's talk about brain food quickly. I've done lots of work in this space: Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, our course Eat to Beat Depression, 50 Shades of Kale, the sexiest book on a cruciferous vegetable out there by far. And I tell people to really think about a few things that I feel are missing in this conversation. Where are you from as an eater? What motivates you? What are you passionate about? Who are your people? What's your dietary tribe? And I don't just mean like, oh, you're paleo or keto or Whole30. I mean more of like you. Are you is your family from a certain part of the world? Are there certain spices and dishes that remind you of home, of mom, of dad, of grandma? Are there certain baked goods that, right, when you make it on a Sunday, just really fills you up with a feeling of nostalgia and family? I'm really interested in that. I don't want to tell you that apple pie is horrible for you, because I don't think it is. I think it's great for your mental health and your mental fitness to connect in a more kind of spiritual and familial and cultural way to your food and your nutrition. That's what makes it important. That's what takes it out of this garbage commercialized diet that's getting recommended to so many people. Right? 73% of our intake of calories is ultra processed food. Right, processed food, like when I don't know, cut up an avocado and put some olive oil on it. Okay, those are processed foods. Those are great. But when you move into the ultra processed foods, these are food products, right? You're going to see, whey protein, isolated proteins, and you're going to see, inverted glucose and fructose sugars and invert sugars and food dyes, and maybe not anymore, but food. You're going to see stuff to make it seem like food, and that's irresistibly delicious. Low fat key lime pie yogurt. It's not really something that was made for human mental health. And so nutrition, I have a few quick tools so we can get to the other, but nutrition for me is really one of those foundational ideas of how do you take care of the self? What patterns are you in? And how do you set yourself up? I know if my fridge or freezer is full of ice cream, I eat a lot of ice cream. I knew for a period when I needed to stop drinking. No alcohol in my house. It was great. Now there's alcohol in my house. I don't drink it. There's I like to open my fridge and look. Everybody open your fridge and look. What do you see? You see nothing. You see a 6-pack of beer and some like hot sauce and some old fast food. I'm here for you. Call me, DM me. We'll talk later today. But like, what's it look like? Because if you see rainbow vegetables, right? If you see some fun little fermented foods in there, maybe you see some frozen fish in your freezer, some tins of sardines and anchovies on your shelf, some nuts. I have this little rhyme: seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. Just good place to start. So that's nutrition for mental health, again, with this notion of let's frame nutrition not around calories. Calories are important, but they're really most important for calculating nutrient density. The idea that a calorie is a calorie when it comes to energy, but an avocado calorie is bringing with it all kinds of nutrients from fats, proteins, slow-burning carbs, phytonutrients. Right? That's a better deal than a calorie that doesn't really come with anything. It just comes with energy.
Now, a couple of questions. One is the Mediterranean diet, excuse me, the Mediterranean diet includes red wine. And are you saying that because of all of the recent data that's come out on the correlation between alcohol and cancer, that no longer, that we should not be drinking at all?
Yeah, that's my recommendation. But that's been my recommendation before this data came out. If you're having mental health problems, I think you should stop drinking. Period.
Okay. Even like a little bit, you think any amount is not a good thing for people? Because I feel like this is around the world in different cultures, this becomes the question. Are we overdoing it with wine and alcohol?
Yes.
No, but I mean, are we overdoing it with the rules around it, like we overdo everything else?
No. This is so ridiculous.
Okay.
This is so ridiculous. Like the world's drunk. Like,
okay.
I mean, America's drunk. People are out of control with alcohol. Right? People are dying left and right from DUI, drunk driving. I mean, like, come on.
Yeah. Okay.
So
well, that's behavioral.
Can I have a little tipple of wine? It's like, sure, you can have a little tipple of wine. This isn't about like having a glass of wine. This is that most people listening who are struggling with alcohol are drinking 2 to 3 drinks per night on the weekdays.
Yeah.
I've heard people call it their program, right? And then on the weekends or whenever they can, they're often drinking a lot more. And this certainly slows down as people age because you can't tolerate it. I turned 50. Oh my gosh. Actually, I haven't been drinking for years, so I don't know. But in the 40s, wow. It's like, it's a different experience. But, the youth of America, the college drinking culture, it's shifting. So I don't want to be like hysterical and have people feel shamed. I think the reason I maybe sometimes hesitate is, people drink some. I want to treat you and help you get better if that's what you're doing. I also sit with people. I don't know, just this week I sat with a man who boy, 7, 8 years of sobriety, started drinking a little bit again. A guy I've known for a long time, and had and just had a full relapse.
Mm,
Horrible arguments, just horrible guilt. Back in AA, I think he's day 12, no drinking. And it was
mm,
such a, again, just a privilege to sit with him and be kind of back on the track of helping him sit with his feelings, not use alcohol to cope and to blunt.
mm-hmm.
And so again, I don't want to come across as like a big teetotaler, and that I certainly spent a lot of years as a New Yorker drinking alcohol, enjoying wine, drinking a lot. I don't want to come across as a hypocrite. I just
Yeah,
also think we're not being
I
very
understand.
serious about our mental health anymore, and most
Yeah,
people are really, really fucked up. And
yeah,
it's just it's we're not in the pandemic anymore, and even beyond that, whatever reason we have, like why are we rationalizing it? Like, why are we rationalizing all of the excessive food, excessive alcohol, excessive screen time?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It just I think we're better
Yeah.
than that.
Well, let me get back to nutrition for a second because you gave us a very comprehensive overview of your thoughts on nutrition. I tend to feel like nutrition is something that should be almost a part of like precision medicine or personalized medicine because each of us is, some people are, it's, solving for mental health, and here's a prescription, if you will, for the right diet that will best help you have brain health. Other people are solving for heart disease, for diabetes, for irritable bowel syndrome, for
Hmm.
a rheumatoid arthritis. Like there are a host of other illnesses or conditions that require a different type of diet. So I always feel like it should be very personalized. What's your thought on that?
I think it's being very circumspect, and I think it's something that oftentimes is missed in the conversation. That like lots of people are dealing with lots of different things, and
Mm-hmm,
there's so
mm-hmm.
much I think judgment and so much maybe I just sounded too judgmental around alcohol, but there's so much judgment and not enough curiosity. That I think the challenge with precision medicine is there's a little bit of an illusion in a certain way, right? That a lot of maybe genetic testing or a lot of um, uh, thought can go into like exactly what you need. I think I
Mm-hmm.
say this just as a note of caution as a nutritional psychiatrist. People often come to see me and talk about a hope they had that there'll be something I see. You don't eat cabbage, or you're not eating this food or that food, and I haven't really found that to be the case. There's a singular missing food or a single missing
Mm-hmm.
nutrient. Sometime, obviously there's some dietary patterns where you don't get enough protein or B12 or folate. Um, uh, and uh, and however, there are kind of places where trying to just eat for mental health, like if you're just trying to eat for mental health and you're eating lots of fiber and you have irritable bowel syndrome and FODMAPs, fructo-oligodisaccharides, these starches that you're not really able to digest as much are going to cause lots of gas and bloating and discomfort, and your IBS is going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or I had a patient with a rare mast cell activation disorder, which I learned the hard way. You don't tell those patients to eat fermented foods because it's horrible for them. It triggers huge histamine dumps. So,
Mm.
there are ways that you do want to be very precise. I think there's some overlap. Heart health, I certainly, there is no kind of eating for mental health without eating for heart health, because if your brain is not getting enough oxygen as you age, the 60s, 70s, and 80s are not nearly as much fun. Cognitively and in other places in your life.
Right,
And
right,
so
right.
vascular health
Yes,
is hugely important.
yes.
It's a fun thing being a psychiatrist. I really check lipids on my patients. There's a whole new kind of, again, level of heart health and lipid health that we're understanding. And so,
Yeah.
where, I agree, we want to be precise. I think,
Mm-hmm.
culturally, I think also fiscally, I come from really rural Indiana.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to make
No.
my recommendations for food of
Very
foods that
good
you can get
point.
at Walmart, Costco,
Yeah.
Winn-Dixie, Kroger, like the big grocery stores, Albertsons, where,
Yes.
this isn't, I'd like you to go buy white beans. That's, kind of a top recommendation.
And soak them overnight.
Yeah, right. Because it's great value, and and it's easy, and it's packed with nutrition, fiber, B vitamins.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on to the tenet number 3, which is movement, which you've talked a little bit about. You said dance has such an edge because you're moving, you're connecting, you're learning new choreography, that it's like a wonderful way to go. I think that way about conducting, actually. When I look at a conductor,
Right,
I'm like,
yeah.
he or she moving, uh, expressive, connecting. It's like everything that I think is just perfection around movement and music. So, and you also talk about embracing joyful movement.
I think I appreciate intense movement, but in the book I talk and get a little critical about a kind of no pain, no gain type of idea.
Okay.
And I appreciate from a muscle development standpoint where that comes from. But, for a lot of people, like let's say people with pain syndromes, that's actually not a very good idea. And I have a lot of patients with chronic pain or patients with injuries. If you've broken your leg or your ankle, and no pain, no pain gain is, I don't know, just like an off-putting idea. I know that's not how it's intended. And so embracing movement, I think, is just a really wonderful idea. I think especially also as we age, moving from just strength and endurance, okay, but there are really other important parts. When you're my age and you're a guy, if you're not like working on your hip flexibility and like low squats and all this stuff that lunges that you've never really thought about, you're not going to age well. It's not going to happen, right? If you're not working on your core strength, you're not going to age well. You're going to have back problems. It's just, in some ways, again, that notion of healing the modern brain, this modern part, we've never had so much sedentary lifestyle. We've never had so much encouragement for sitting is so awesome right now in history. I mean, I can go around the world. I can learn another language. I can talk to my family by video and my friends. Like, why would I ever get up? and so the movement part is really, and I speak very personally. It's very important because I struggle with this part. I was a college athlete, and boy, I being in environments, being in habits where I'm kind of always moving is super important, because what happens when you're a psychiatrist and you get busy, or a therapist? All of my colleagues, what's the number one risk factor correlated with sudden death? It's sitting. And what do we do as you get busy and you sit? I can sit for 12 hours a day if I'm not careful. And so can you. So can everybody listening. You don't have to be a therapist. So all to say, movement's important, and it can be a walk. I just want every day. It's one of those, it's like, how much? And it's just like every day. And
Every
I want
day,
you to count it as points on the board, as a win, right? If you're stretching out those hips tonight, all my middle-aged guys listening, if you're down there really in that deep squat, great, give yourself credit for it. It doesn't. This happened the other day. I don't know why it's been happening. Like, my young bros in my practice have been harassing me about exercise and then breaking out into push-ups. It's never happened in my career, but I've had 200 to 300 push-ups done recently in the last few weeks in my sessions. It's like a phenomena. I don't know what's happening.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it kind of makes sense. We see each other every week. Shouldn't we bang out 100 push-ups just to I don't know, we're there for 45 minutes. It's a little distracting, but it's kind of fun. All to say, where you can squeeze it in, squeeze it in. So movement is a great tenet, and I'm worried we're going to run out of time. I want everybody to hear them. And these first ones are kind of, I think of the fundamental every day. You got to move. You got to eat well. You got to be self-aware.
Yeah.
How am I feeling in the world? How am I feeling in this corpus?
Yes.
What's going on with me today? How am I going to best care for myself and love this mind and this body? So I have to move it
well. Yeah. And then you can go ahead and talk about sleep, which we've had a lot of sleep experts on the show. And it's amazing how many experts there are and how increasing the numbers of insomnia are. I don't think there's a correlation.
I think sleep is also one of those things where the recommendations, the kind of sleep hygiene recommendation.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit when I got involved in nutrition. It was like the nutrition recommendations back then. It was like low fat, low sodium.
Right.
Go, and it wasn't very inspiring to people. And I think part of where folks struggled. Like, I guess that means like no pesto and olive oil, and right? It's like, no, those are
Yeah.
great for you. With sleep, I think there's a set of recommendations that people hear and maybe don't take as seriously. I love Sleep Today. I don't have any affiliation, but I track my sleep. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. Great to see. I have patients with insomnia now track their sleep. So it's not like perfect lab grade data, but it's so awesome to start to have more data, more numbers, right? More awareness. I know I woke up at 4 a.m. I had a really intense, somewhat bad dream. I really struggled to fall back to sleep. I fell back to sleep. I can tell you exactly how much sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, exactly according to this tracker that I had. And I find it helpful, and inspiring, and sometimes a reminder. So sleep, there's also some cool things. We talk about things like lavender aromatherapy in the book. There's a molecule in lavender called linalool. And actually, when you do linalool aromatherapy, your blood levels rise. It's very calming and sedating. We talk about, the links between movement and sleep, and the difference between the connection between mental health problems and sleep. People really oftentimes aren't connecting anxiety, depression, cognitive fog with bad sleep, and then expecting so much of themselves. You all are so hard on yourselves these days. It's like, hey, you didn't eat well. You're not moving your body. You've got a bunch of grief, and you didn't sleep well last night, but you're thinking you're going to be in a great mood today. And it's like, that's not very fair. That doesn't make sense to me. So I want everybody sleeping better. And that means crazy early bedtimes. Like, if everybody stopped drinking and engaged in the right sleep, like the late shows would go out of business. I like those guys too. Like, I don't want to hurt Jimmy Fallon's business, but realistically, you should be in bed before those guys. It's like 9:30.
Well, tell us about, okay, so we could talk about sleep for hours. So we're going to just,
you've had lots of sleep experts. Get more sleep, everybody.
Yeah.
That's my advice,
Okay. We are going to park that. Let's talk about connection in a hyper-connected world, which we have, and also engagement. I was very curious about your recommendations on cognitive engagement and how important that is to our brain health.
Yeah, and those two are sort of dovetailed also for a reason.
Yep.
It's creating connection. A lot of us, I think, have sets of acquaintances, friends, and that kind of reality in life of relationships deepening, some of them, and experiences with people really connecting us with them, and other relationships that kind of fade. And so working on your connections and thinking about mapping them out, it's a very important aspect of mental health. We know with the hyper-connected world, i.e. we're following lots of people, we're seeing lots of images. We also have this huge loneliness epidemic. It was really wonderful. Our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, releasing this report saying, hey, there is a loneliness epidemic. And then again, related back to these principal themes, what happens when you're lonely? Your brain doesn't grow as well. Your inflammatory factors is higher. Your microbiome is less diverse. Like, what? So there are these real consequences and in your physiology. And then again, real solutions. Do you need 1 million best friends? No, that's actually impossible. And, do you need maybe a bit of a strategy, a bit of an accounting, a bit of post-pandemic, like, okay, who is this, group I'm with aligned with my values and intention? Am I having a good time with these people? Am I enjoying myself? Am I learning things? So connection with people, with institutions, with family is something I ask people to map out, think about, and engage in really as one, just good stuff. We all know, right? It's like, when do you feel good? It's like you're sitting around the dinner table with a bunch of people who you care about, yucking it up, laughing. I feel like I'm in trouble because of my hyperbolic alcohol statements, but like maybe even having a drink, right? Talking with each other, connecting. That's where I think alcohol is okay, Patricia, where people have anxiety and they don't connect, and then with just a little bit of alcohol, they just feel a loosening. And it doesn't kind of exceed, I don't know, a little bit. I don't know. So it's hard not to call that a bit of a win for people if it doesn't impair their mood. But yeah, with this new cancer risk. Anyway, back to connection.
Balance. Back to connection and then engagement, because I'm curious about your hobby algorithm.
Yeah, I have a hobby algorithm for you in the book, and why? Because we get so focused on work as adults. and if everybody's a parent, I mean, it's like, that's your work, right? And so you kind of become like a mix of short order cook and transport captain, and you lose that sense of play and sense of engagement. I notice this sometimes when I'm in sports, particularly like mountain biking, where I like that because I can't have a phone in my hand. Really good tip
Mm-hmm.
for me, at least for a
Mm-hmm.
little while. And or I've moved out to Wyoming, where there's a lot of snowboarding in my life, and I just like it because you can't really think of anything else when you're moving along. You really
Mm-hmm.
need to be focused. You kind of keep moving your mind back to focus. So cognitive engagement, I think, particularly as we're aging, both with our minds, with reading, with ideas, with taking a course. I just find the people who retain mental fitness, my mentors who I've seen in my life, I see them keep doing this.
Yeah.
One of the guys I talk about in the book, my Uncle Bob, he's in the movement chapter, but Uncle Bob also had this big career shift in his late 40s, early 50s. He went from being a practicing psychiatrist to being the chief medical officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield, Illinois. A totally different shift, right? It just, that's not what everybody needs to do. It's a work shift. But there was this period where he just was like learning. He like went half time. He just started learning, started engaging, started writing more. It's just really fascinating
Mm.
for me to watch that. So I've seen so many people do things like that where, or another, I think Chip Connolly is his name. He has a book on aging and middle age, and he has this
Mm-hmm.
kind of elder academy, right? Where he says,
Yes.
hey, man, we have so much wisdom, but like life changes. It's about different
Yeah.
things. Why don't we learn about that together? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
engagement is really inviting people to enjoy themselves, to engage. I joke a little bit that I'm a hedonistic psychiatrist, and then I got corrected. Like, I'm both hedonistic, but I want some of that hedonism to be like really around meaning, not
Mm-hmm.
just pleasure
Yeah.
around pleasure, but the pleasure of meaning in your life.
Yeah.
And so engagement helps you get there.
Yes, definitely. Well, we should go to purpose then, because that's kind of a segue from what you were just saying about meaning. But if you want to also add something about the other two
For
that are
sure,
part
for
of the
sure.
nine, which is grounding, which is
Yeah.
getting out in nature, which we all love, and unburdening, which is tell me your problems.
Yeah, yeah, that and maybe we should save a little of the book. I hope everybody will take a peek at it and order, or also listen. I recorded the audiobook
Mm.
myself, which is just a wonderful experience. But I feel really, I how do I put it? There's a way that you get it. I hope exactly how I intended it, and because some of these concepts are very nuanced. But grounding, being in nature, grounding yourself in nature. We are natural beings in nature. I talk about big nature. I'm out here in Wyoming, and during this book, in writing this book, I've been from New York to rural Indiana to Wyoming, and so I spend a lot of time thinking about nature. I share a lot about my time living in very rural Indiana with my family on our farm, and
Mm.
some of how that helped me with my mental health. And then unburdening is it's a big request. It's a big subject. It's hard to fit in. But unburdening really specifically was my experience of meeting so many people who have so much trauma,
Mm.
and that trauma getting in their way, and not just traumas of violence. There's a new set of traumas, like traumas of losing your house or family members being displaced to natural weather events or
Mm-hmm.
horrible fires. Or the traumas that happen these days, getting bullied online, or or subtle traumas that aren't so subtle, like people not being cared for during certain periods of development, or not fitting in your family, or having a narcissistic parent. There's all these things that I'm convinced all of us carry. I don't want to make everyone a trauma victim, but I do think the understanding of the self for many people requires a sitting and an unburdening. And so sometimes that, is best done with professionals. Sometimes that can be done, and I think is often best done with groups and with other people. And so I share about unburdening, and the idea of these tenets kind of builds to a sense, of finding meaning and purpose. And I hear, I think, a lot of misguidance or misinformation on this, right? This idea that you should follow your passion. And I think that's hard, especially as so many people, we have 50 million Americans struggling with their mental health. The idea of like, find your passion, it's not great advice for them. Or, young people. I work with so many people in college and in their 20s. I'm so fortunate to kind of beam into dorm rooms around the country and kind of get a pulse of the youth of America.
Mm.
And, this there's this burden to kind of know yourself before you're even formed and have your life path before you're even so clear about it. And that kind
Yeah.
of exalted in some way, these child prodigies who start really young, and all those people burn out for the most part, or,
Yeah.
it's sort of, so spending time getting to know yourself, letting your sense of purpose evolve, and thinking about through things that you enjoy,
Yeah.
which is maybe again a little bit of a shift, right? That if you enjoy mission work and building houses for for humanity, wonderful, right? But if that's not your thing, that's okay. Maybe
Hmm.
your purpose is spending some time with elderly people in your family because you really care about them, or maybe your purpose is a more internal thing. It's about working on your poetry right now. It doesn't have
Hmm.
maybe such a sense of a bigger, grander thing. So I really invite people to think about this broadly, think about this around enjoyment and
Hmm.
a mix of pleasure and then with that notion of also service.
Yeah.
That so
Yeah.
often my mental health has really been saved by my profession. No matter how I feel, I get to get up, go to work, and so often have the experience of helping someone. And boy, man, that just, I mean, I don't think there's anything that feels better than that to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the advice that so many people give when someone's feeling really down is go be of service to someone else. So that's very lovely that that's already integrated into your profession. Drew, is there anything else that you want to share? Maybe your personal routine for mental
I can
fitness?
share a little bit about my personal
Yeah,
routine
share
for
your
mental
personal
fitness.
routine
I want
before we
everybody to,
close.
boy, I feel I got a little intense there. I want everybody who's still with us just to thank you and to feel, I hope this book gives you encouragement. There's so many
Hmm.
people kind of judging, telling, and I really tried to write something that was, I hope both powerful and straightforward and even simple at times, and encouraging and true. I think if you engage in these tenets consistently, that your mental fitness and your mental health will improve. And I say that both seeing it in my patients, but also myself. I mean,
Hmm.
I share a little bit more about my mental health than I ever have in this book, which for all of us in the profession, especially if you're a little on the older side, is a little challenging. It's not, kind of taught not to do that. But I talk a little bit about some struggles with my mood in particular. And so my mental fitness routine, it certainly revolves around, let's say, my struggles and evolution. Right now, I'm in the midst of a book launch period, right? So consistent nutrition and focusing on eating a lot of plants and seafood are the things that I consistently kind of try and keep track of. It's easy for me to eat, reasonably healthy carbs and beans and even some good grass fed beef and buffalo out here or bison, but it's uh, I kind of had a set of goals. Right, I found myself
Hmm.
uh, because I know I'm going to be busy stocking up, buying more things. Like instead, I'm not going to make my own pesto for the next month or two, right? Because I've got other stuff. I'm a little too busy, so I'm buying packaged pestos. I'm not soaking my beans, or we're not soaking our beans. I'm buying canned beans so I can quickly grab these foods. I've gotten really into using a sauna at night. I've had like a lot of middle-aged people, real challenges with some mid-evening insomnia. And so part of my
Hmm.
mental fitness was one, developing a better routine where I'm not waking up feeling just the worst mental health influencer because I don't sleep at all. And here it is 3 a.m. and I'm feeling really badly about myself in the middle of the night. Ugh. So I really worked hard to meet myself at 2 or 3 a.m. in whatever mood I am, do some journaling, have a glass of water, not engage in too much light, and then go back
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
bed.
Yeah.
But I also found the sauna really helps me sleep through the night. And again, that kind of notion of tracking my sleep, helping with that, really seeing that so obviously.
Yeah.
And then for me, a big focus in terms of my mental fitness over the last few years has been around connection and around doing a better job being a good partner in my connections, checking in on people, emailing people. Um, uh, Sometimes I feel a little silly because it's kind of random, or even, I don't know, I sent an email to the colleague the other day and I realized I hadn't emailed her in a long time, and it was very, friendly and bouncy. And I thought, that's me.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so those are, and the way that I do that is really to try and think about um, simple steps and simple actions, and going with some of my intuition and my feeling. If you pop into my mind, we've been trading voicemails, like it's just kind of like on, I don't know, kind of on my list, rattling around in there of something
Yeah.
I need to do. And those, and then I say the one that's really striking me is grounding. I've been really working on being in big nature by myself. I've got my emotional support dog with me, so it's not quite that stoic, but there's something about being really out there, especially kind of at night or in the early evening, kind of maybe several miles out, which is very easy to do here in Jackson, Wyoming, and feeling a sense of grounding and a sense of belonging. That's been a focus of mine more
Yeah.
recently. And again, I hope people hear the sort of stacking. When I'm out there, let's say it's the morning or the evening, with the dog, moving my body, getting early morning light, I'm helping my sleep, I'm doing movement, I'm taking in myself and my surroundings in an act of self-awareness. It's engaged because these days I'm cross country skiing and I'm trying not to fall, and but also there's so much nature. So
Yeah.
as you'll see, the tenets kind of naturally stack, and go out
Yes.
for a hike in nature with some good friends with some healthy snacks.
That's
That's a
it.
great act of mental
Yeah.
fitness in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Drew, thank you so much for sharing all of this great wisdom from your book. It's coming out in March, and very excited for everyone to get a copy. I'm so happy to be able to read it in advance. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I hope people will check out the book. Thank you so much for all the kind comments about the book and asking me to kind of get into the nitty gritty of the how much and the what. And I hope people feel my encouragement. There's also an e-course if people want to kind of dive into these things in a more detailed, kind of longer way in video format, and lots of information on my website, along with some free downloads. And I'm also up on Instagram and easy to find. So everyone, I hope you
Awesome.
feel inspired, and mostly I hope 2025 is a year of a revolutionary mental fitness, of a mental fitness
Yes.
revolution for you.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear about it. Patricia, thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing the word and spreading the word, and also having so many episodes just to help people take care of their mental health and their minds and learn more about meditation and healthy habits. So I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Mm.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.